Good evening and welcome to another edition of 60 Minutes in Black America. My name is Mike Haney. We have a outstanding show for you tonight. You don't want to miss this. We'll be right back. Good evening. My name is Mike Haney and welcome to another edition of 60 Minutes in Black America. Today's show, I got to tell you, is an emotional one for me just because of who we have today on the show, Mr. Dr. Keith Motley. He is the former Chancellor of University of Massachusetts, Boston, and just an outstanding individual and human being. One of the first role models that I had in my life as a mentor. And back then in the late 70s, I described myself as a knucklehead suffering from knuckleheadism and needing someone in the city of Boston to give me direction. Keith was a quiet power of example for a multitude of us in the city of Boston, the consummate gentleman, a degree of humility, understanding, and at 6'9", a pretty powerful example and wonderful basketball player. And I believe to Coach Jim Calhoun, who we all have heard of at the University of Connecticut, was the first recruit of Coach Calhoun at Northeastern University. So today we're going to celebrate, talk about, and guess what? We had a multitude of people associated with Dr. Motley over the course of his life to date that wanted to join us, but we got a few coming on. He doesn't know that, to help us tell his story. So let's bring Dr. Motley into the stream. Dr. Motley, how you doing today, sir? So let's bring Dr. Motley into the stream to help us.
I am so honored to be here with you tonight. It's amazing to see you. I have been keeping up, as you know, with you. You know how much my family loves you. They've never forgotten how you accommodated us as you moved on in your life. You didn't forget those who were part of your life when you were developing. And now today to be able to sit here and talk with you is just an honor, but it's also an opportunity for reflection. And, you know, as you go through life, you don't get many times to reflect. And so this reflection will allow for lots of, fun and other things to come out. And so I appreciate that, man. It's very therapeutic to be able
Appreciate you being here, and it hopefully is therapeutic to all of us. And I have to tell you that the promotions for your show have been off the chain, particularly in the area of Boston. So I know a lot of people are looking forward to this conversation. And we have a lot to cover, Dr. Motley, and I'm gonna try not to slip and give you your just due of continuing to call you Dr. Motley, because that's truly what you deserve. But before we really get started, I want to play this video of something that you said a bit ago.
Is what I've probably been running from all my life. You know, I grew, like I said, my grandfather was a pastor. So I grew up in the church, and I think I grew up in a wonderful church community that was always about giving and teaching and learning and that kind of thing. So I always knew I had a calling. I knew sort of kind of it wasn't to the ministry, but I didn't understand until I got older that you don't have to have a pulpit to have a ministry or to have a calling that you feel fulfilled enough in your life to understand what its relationship is to you as an individual and to the greater good of humanity and all those kinds of things, you know, that they talk about. So when you when I'm working with young people, it's really about that bridging that whole piece through this calling or this mission that I think that, you know, I've been fortunate enough to be a part of for all these years you talk about.
Well, that was a pretty powerful piece, man. What do you think about that piece? And my question to you is that it appears as though when you came to the city of Boston, you were settled, you know, you had Christ in your life, you seemed to have a role model. How did you transition from Pittsburgh to Boston and be focused to what it was you came there for?
Phil, that's Dr. Clarence Williams, one of the most prolific scholars in America, who's been one of my mentors for decades. He was at MIT. He's retired from MIT to North Carolina, but hasn't retired. And in fact, he's still serving on some doctoral dissertation pieces. Coming up in Pittsburgh, what I had was exposure. And that exposure is something that every human being should have. You know, I'm a church boy. I grew up in Pittsburgh in Shiloh Baptist Church as a youngster. And in that church, you know, I had to sit in the front row of the church. At the time, you don't understand. In fact, until I became an adult, I didn't even know that there were backs of heads for people, because all I saw was the pulpit, and then I turned around and I saw the faces in church. My grandfather was an assistant pastor there, but I fondly remember all the learning opportunities. Miss Kathleen Davis, my kindergarten instructor, while my mother was my first teacher, Miss Kathleen Davis was the first person in those Bible study classes, Sunday school, all of that, who made me feel so powerful as a thinker, as a learner, as a human being, and, you know, just helped me transition, gave me leadership opportunities, all those kinds of things. In church, you know, we had oratory competitions because the Motleys couldn't lose to the Williams or to the Harrises or to the Johnsons or any of those folk, because, you know, that meant not missing a word in your speech. And at the time, we didn't know that the speeches were the Beatitudes or something that came out of the Bible. At that time, we thought we had to just learn these speeches. And then when we were able to transition that knowledge and understand where it was contextually, it was an amazing, amazing, amazing thing for us. And so, yeah, I was a church boy. I continue to smile because that centers me. You know, learning to have unshakable faith as a youngster helps you as you get older when these trials and tribulations come up. The other thing was, because I was always on the pulpit for Children's Day or for these speeches and all that, you know, everyone in the church is telling you, oh, you're going to be our pastor. You're going to be this and that. And they didn't know that I was probably the most devilish of my siblings. My brother, who was in trouble in their minds all the time, he was my older brother. He took my weight, and I was the one in trouble all the time. So as I was saying to Dr. Williams, I ran from that. Even when I came to college, they wanted to send me to, you know, a seminary or something, or a divinity school from my church. But I ended up here in Boston, going to Northeastern, as you know, as a scholar and an athlete and all those kinds of things. And it wasn't until I became able to sit down and reflect. And I went over to Mount Moriah Baptist Church in Brockton, and the pastor's wife heard me speak somewhere. And she rolled up on me and she says, "You have one of the most powerful ministries I have seen somebody have." And she was stunned because we sat in the back seat in the church.
Wow.
As far as we could get away from the pulpit. And after that day, we couldn't get away from. They had me, you never get a chance for a layperson to speak on Communion Sunday. They had your boy up there speaking on Communion Sunday.
Oh, wow, man. That is powerful. And,
Oh,
we're going to play some
that
remarks of yours later on where you talk about the fact that we don't need a pulpit. Because I have studied you, and I have studied you and studied you, having known you since I was 18, you were 20 at that time.
right,
But
exactly.
there's so much to reveal of your life, man. And you talk about the pulpit. You talk about a pulpit as a platform for us that may not be endowed or be of ministerial stature. What is our pulpit? So we're going to get into that a bit as well. But I have to acknowledge, Dr. Motley, coming from Pittsburgh, having a multitude of Pittsburgh people on our production team. I appreciate you being here while Pittsburgh is playing Cincinnati as
man.
the game,
I
and
love
it shows your commitment. It shows you, but that shows the type of man you are. So my next question for you, having left Pittsburgh, seemingly well prepared, going into a city that you still reside in that was at the cusp of desegregation at that time, right?
Yes.
Were you prepared? Were you prepared for Boston? Was there anything a shock, or you knew what you were going into?
Well, one of the benefits of going to Northeastern at that time was the kind of mentors and the kind of value, we would say, preparation now for a lifetime of responsibility and a lifetime of contributions. That was hammered into us as soon as you got into Boston. And so at the African American Institute was Dean Gregory Rickson. You had at the African American Studies Department, Dr. Ramona Ellerlin, who to this day remains one of my biggest mentors and biggest, rooters and advisors, and has been at every moment in my life where I've had to transition from dean to vice chancellor to chancellor to professor, whatever it's been, she's been there, and so has Dean Ricks. But there were so many along that way that helped prepare us. Now, I used to get standing ovations when I went home from Boston to Pittsburgh, because they would see all the things, the flag on City Hall, hitting the brother as he walked across the mall, all those kinds of things. And everything they heard about Boston made them feel that. But then I went to a baseball game, and as I was walking across the bridge to Three Rivers at the time, all across the bridge were signs about joining the Ku Klux Klan or joining this and that. And that was in Pittsburgh. And so while Pittsburgh is this unbelievable smorgasbord of just, the demographics are incredible. I grew up playing spin the dreidel, bocce ball, because we had Italian, Jewish, Black. We all lived in the same neighborhood, okay? And so I grew up with all that exposure to individuals. And so while we may have had we were eating in each other's homes growing up. So coming up here and seeing how, segregated communities were blew me away. But they put you right out into the neighborhood to work. They exposed you. You didn't just come up here and get caught up in Northeastern. No one would allow you to do that. And so for me, that value formation was so incredible. And, I ended up over at the African American Institute on a bet. The dean had saw us, and we went to orientation, and myself and Vince Anderson and a few others that came up with me from Pittsburgh, John Clark and all those guys. And he said, if we beat you in volleyball, you got to come to the Institute. And so, my athletic ego said, we're going to kill these guys. Not knowing that he was still a youngster, because at the time he may have been 24 years old. But when you're 17, somebody at 24 looks like an old man to you. So we're out here playing, and they got lucky enough to beat us. And this volleyball hit me upside my head, man. And all I remember was sitting beside the fence looking at all the girls that were there saying they just saw this dude dog me. We just showed up in Boston. My life is over. And I have to go to the African American Institute. But that volleyball upside the head changed my life.
So that was a wake-up call for you getting hit upside the head, huh?
With a volleyball, man, by a dean. I didn't even know what a dean was, man.
I hear you. Well, you know, I know that Northeastern, from cooperative education, put you out in the world. At least it did for me. And I tell people all the time, having to interact and integrate and intertwine with people who I knew did not necessarily like me, but I had to be there, right? And as you mentioned, the flag down in Faneuil Hall, the black man being stabbed by it, and some of the other atrocities relative to racism in a state that was geared towards liberal, right-wing party of the Kennedys, the O'Neills, the Dukakis, et cetera. You wonder why and what the rest of America had to show. But Boston grew me up, and it sounded like that hitting the head with that volleyball grew you up. But let's transition a bit, because we got so much to get to in terms of your phenomenal life, your impact on people, because I described you as a serial educator, and we have to explain that, because sometimes we get lost in the context of a terminology, and they say, why do you use the word serial? Because we associate it with something that isn't necessarily good. You understand what I'm saying, right?
Well, because every opportunity I get, as you know, I am in that education mode. Odessa talked about her and her son playing bocce. I have a bocce ball court in my backyard. I've turned so many people on to bocce up here. What a learning opportunity. You educate in anything that you do. When I walk around campus as a dean, okay, it's been amazing as a student, as a dean, as a vice president, as an individual, and I walk around the community. Yesterday, I spoke at the hip hop conference here in Boston and moderated for them, and then walked down to the Hip Hop Hall of Fame. So you're always educated, but you're also being educated, okay? It goes both ways. So I never miss an opportunity to learn. I wake up every morning with this inquisitive nature of wanting to know, you know, what can I learn today? What is it that I can benefit from in my experience? How do I move from being a tourist in the work to somebody who is living and dealing in that work every day, you know? And then it's okay to be a tourist sometimes and a purist other times, you know? Because in my generation, when it comes to hip hop, I might be a purist. But with these youngsters today, I might be a tourist in their space. But I can teach them something and they can teach me something. But
and then, you know, that's what makes you so powerful. I'm certain.
I was honored when you said serial educator coming from you. I already knew the spirit in which that is taken. And
absolutely, so, man. Absolutely. And we're going to explain that.
I knew exactly what you meant, because it happened with you. I ran into you as one of my undergraduate years, as someone who was younger than me. And I was able to sit and talk with you about what my experience was, not trying to influence you, because your experience will be different, but cautioning you that, hey man, that shoe store that you're looking for is on the corner of Blue Hill Avenue and Washington Street. Now, it might be closed now, but that's where it was a year ago, all right? But so when you take the 23 bus. Or if you want to walk, because you're a track guy, you know, or run up there, you get there in like 10 minutes. You know, that's the exchange. And in that, there's a lot of education, okay, that happens in that space, man. So I know I was honored when I saw the flyer. I was pleasantly not surprised, but, you know, I was grateful.
Well, you know what, and as well you should, because you're absolutely right. The intention of what you've done and how you have explained how you can, by being receptive to all forms of learning from all people so that you in return can reciprocate, but also have new knowledge implanted in you that you can give out as well. And many people don't understand that that's the aspects of education that keeps us fresh, renewed, so that we can continue to show people as a power of example, because you're a power of example. And I want to talk about your basketball / academics for a minute before we transition into you leaving physically maybe the campus of Northeastern as you've begun to explore the world. I think from a mental perspective, you have always remained. But is that you and Jim Calhoun?
Yeah, in fact, Coach and I were together last week. I was the featured speaker at his, he asked me to come down and be the final speaker at a dedication of a court to him in Connecticut last week. And I was his first Division I basketball recruit. And he's always been, I never have called him by his first name. And there are lots of mentors in my life who are in that exalted space with me. You know, they even have worked with me on campuses where I've been supposedly their chancellor or their boss or their vice chancellor or their president or what have you, you know, but they have come to work with me and they have been incredible influences in my life. See, basketball was for me a vehicle. It was a vehicle that got me out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Dr. Richard Mullins, who was the who played at Northeastern, was at John Clark's Upward Bound program at Carnegie Mellon.
And John Clark from Pittsburgh, right? Isn't John Clark from Pittsburgh?
We grew up together. Him, myself, Vince Anderson, Mel Bennett, who played in the NBA for like 13 years. We all grew up in the same neighborhood. You could walk. I could hear everybody's house with back in the day. I'm left-handed and I had an arm. I could hit it with a rock, you know, just turn in every direction. I'm hitting your house. And or I'm hitting your house for dinner at some point during the week, because that's your mom and I had a relationship. But the bottom line is that John came up here because of Dr. Richard Mullins having gone to Northeastern and played at Northeastern. When I was playing ball, Mel Bennett was playing with me. Mel was first team All-American. I was a senior, but I was younger than Melvin, but I had sort of accelerated in school. And so the deal was people wanted me to stay back and play and all that. I was ready to go. But everyone began to recruit me to go to all these big time schools because they were trying to get Melvin. And we were smart enough to be inquisitive enough that when they would take us to dinner, we would look in their books when they went to the bathroom, because these were middle-aged men that oftentimes had to go number one or something while we're sitting at the table. And as a kid, you never do that. And we would see if Motley comes and you get Bennett, this was what happened, because back in those days, recruiters got paid to recruit folk. And I had made my mind up that I was going to go anywhere in the world that I knew that they may not come. So Mike Jarvis at the time was working with Coach Calhoun. He was the only black coach that had come into my house at that time recruiting me, and many came. All the schools in Pittsburgh want to get you, and all those schools in Pennsylvania. But I said, I'm going to Boston. I visited. It felt good because it felt like home. And it's been home to me. Also, you know, I'm a violinist. So people had connected me with Miss Lewis, Miss Elma Lewis, the great Elma Lewis, and others here. So that community in Pittsburgh connected me with the community here in Boston. And so all of that interconnectedness allowed for me to say yes to Coach Calhoun. He's taken me into his Hall of Fame plaque with him as his athlete. I was the person he chose to come and speak about his life.
So you and Coach Calhoun, so you're saying to me, Coach Calhoun, and many of us influenced by basketball have heard of Coach Calhoun, who won a number of championships.
3 national championships with UConn. I taught him how to, through protest and other ways, we taught him how to be a better human being. He taught me how to be a man and a better human being. And we both learned from each other, and we got
So
a level of respect.
are you saying that you taught him how to interact and see people as people, and you as a black person
Well, I was his
interact? Is
first
that what you're saying?
experience in that. I was his first experience in that domain. You
So,
know,
so,
at
so
the
you
time,
taught him how that black people were just as human, just as good, just as valuable, just as sensitive as every other human being out there. So that's what you're saying, and that's why you guys were tight, because you taught him that as a black person that you were just as human as he was.
well, he had the humanity part of it right, but it was all the little things like, see that afro right there? That afro was really about 10 inches long. You saw the other pictures, but I would put vinegar on that because back in those days, you couldn't have a big afro. I came to practice one day and he kicked me out because I had braids in my head. And so we went and had a conversation with him. Now, I ended up in that meeting by myself because some of my teammates ended up leaving because he asked them, he said, it sounds like y'all don't have nothing to say, but this guy over here has a lot to say, so he might as well stick around. And they got up and left. But when I stayed there, it was a transformational time for both he and I, because it was the first time he saw me as a developing young man. And I could tell him, Coach, this is why I put braids in my hair. You know, this is what my afro means to me. This is how I grew up. This is why I don't want X and Y. This is why you see me dressing a certain way. This is why you see us doing certain. This is why I'm going to the African American Institute, because at that time they didn't want athletes involved in social justice issues. And to this day, he always claims, he'll always say to everybody who talks to him, this is the greatest guy who could have gone on in basketball if he wanted to, but he had so many diverse interests. I'm glad he did not just settle for basketball.
And so you picked education. You focused on you played basketball all 4 years with Coach Calhoun. I believe that you, and we'll talk about some other players up there, propelled his career to the University of Connecticut. Although all of you were successful, everyone was successful, but you were the impetus of him being able to interact, understand, recruit, deal with players like you that ultimately made his career successful. Is that a fair statement?
That's true. But the other thing is this. When I became chancellor, you know, you're supposed to be academic, right? So I'm probably one of the more non-traditional chancellors you'll ever see in your life, in that I came up through the ranks differently. You know how I came up. You saw how I cut my teeth in the academy, you know? But when you are a chancellor and you're being inaugurated, you're supposed to have Einstein come and speak to the faculty. I had James A. Calhoun speak.
Wow.
And that faculty went absolutely nuts. He's bringing in a coach? Oh my God, what is he doing? And when Coach Calhoun finished speaking, they were crying at it was already crazy because I was so proud to be the first handsome, tall, bald-headed guy to become a president of a research university in the history of Boston in over 400 years. And so this guy at this inauguration came and he told the story of my life in a way that very few people could have done, and blew them out of the water. But they were like, a coach? And
wow. So that's interesting you say that. And let's talk about, because you were admissions counselor, you were a dean, you were a vice chancellor, you've been a professor and still are a professor.
Right.
So let's talk about that time, because there's so much I want to get to about you. And then I've got some very special people that are coming in later to help us celebrate this life, this legacy of this educator to date, because your life is far, far, far from over, as well as your ability to continue to influence and educate. So you were the vice chancellor at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, which is the majority minority university within the UMass system, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, within New England and UMass system, and when I became chancellor, it became #1 everywhere, really.
So
It's
you were
still that
chancellor.
way
You were
across the country.
chancellor. You went from an interim chancellor, right?
Yeah.
You were an interim for a period of time, and then they gave it to you as the chancellor. And explain to the viewers the significance of that title of chancellor, because we know we've got Kurt Smoke here at University of Baltimore, Hrabowski at the University of
All them are my
Maryland, Baltimore
brothers.
County.
Yeah.
You're up there with Harvard University, MIT,
Yeah.
Whitworth, Berkeley. So you're a bastion of education. Boston is looked at as a haven for upper or higher education. And here you are at, I believe, the largest public university in the city as the chancellor.
Exactly.
So what was that road like, Dr.
Well,
Motley?
first of all, one of the beautiful things about the term chancellor is it's typically given to someone that's in charge of all of the stuff. So it's a more exalted title when you go around the world than that of president. And so everywhere in the world, they understand chancellor, because remember, education, particularly higher education, took all of its trimmings and all of its ceremonial and all of its essence from international spaces, Oxford and all these other institutions that have been around and around and around long before Harvard and all those kinds of things. All right. And so within the University of Massachusetts system, because they had started in Amherst by themselves, Boston didn't come until like almost 60 years ago. Okay. Whereas the University of Massachusetts itself was part of that whole public land grant institution piece, where they're out in those kind of spaces like Amherst, and when you go to the University of Michigan, they're in those places, right? But someone wanted to have a campus in Boston. But the idea of the campus in Boston was never to be what we built it into. Okay, it was supposed to stay in its place. It was supposed to be a commuter school. That's the only public university in the city of Boston, because the private schools said that's the only way you can come. Massachusetts is the only place in the world or in the country where public universities are seen as less than, because of all the other privates that are here. There's like 40 private universities. But now that's changed. And people so when you became the value proposition of the University of Massachusetts.
So when you became chancellor, let's talk about that period. When you were chancellor there at the University of Massachusetts at Boston for 10 years. You brought coaches and untraditional speakers instead of world leaders and renowned educators.
I brought those two. I didn't do either or. I did both and.
Okay, and that's because
I met everybody who I ever wanted.
You were educating. You understood you were educating
right.
Mainly African Americans, and you wanted them to be able to identify, or what was your motive as a educator? Because the chancellor to me is to what you did. You educated people. You may have been not in an ivory tower at a point of the highest leadership, but you seem to never lose focus of the mission of your institution, which was educating people, particularly people that look like you. So,
well, I do have to correct you. I was in the highest level of leadership.
Yeah, you were the highest.
When you are chancellor, that's where the buck stops. Okay, and so the reality is, I have served in that space, and I served in there longer than 10 years. However, 10 years is the second act. I served also 2 years where I was basically the chief operating officer of the University of Massachusetts system. And I went from a $400 million budget to a $2.5 billion budget.
So handling all of the finances for the University of Mass system, is that what you're saying as a chief operating officer?
I was a business guy. I had a mentor there from Pittsburgh whose name is Jack Wilson. Jack Wilson is the one who, in fact, when he called me to ask me to be chancellor as the interim, I thought my boys were playing a prank on me because Jack Wilson was the shortstop of the Pittsburgh Pirates. So I thought someone was telling me Jack Wilson was on the phone. And on 4th of July, who would be calling me on the 4th of July? But it was Jack Wilson from Pittsburgh, whose mother was the dinosaur lady at the Carnegie Museum when we were growing up, whose mother and my mother ended up, they were good friends, who he and I are brothers to this day. And he chose me, and then he allowed me to come downtown to work with him, because, I don't work for people, I work with you. If I have to work for you, we got a problem.
Wow.
I don't do that. Okay.
Well, one thing I want to do, I want to play a short clip. I want to play this next clip because, as I said, there's so much I need we need to talk about educational philosophy in Maryland.
Okay, all right. I'll be shorter. You're very nice. I'll be shorter.
We got the third elected Black governor in the state of Maryland, and he has an educational philosophy, and we want to hear what your thoughts are about that. I have a special guest that worked for you that's going to be joining us in a second, but let's play this educational clip of the tribute to Dr. James Keith Motley at the conclusion of your tenure as Chancellor at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. Can we play that clip?
Said, you're late, come on over, your mother, because my mother's like the mother to everyone in town. That's where I got my love from. A 5'3" lady who taught me that a long time ago. Give it out and just watch it come back. So I've never felt unloved. So thank you, Jack Wilson, for this opportunity to serve. That's what I asked. I'm not in this business, or wasn't in it for the thing about being a college president, although my mentors told me that. I ran from that. Sometimes mentors tell you a whole lot of things to inspire you. But I had not seen an example of that in Boston. Tall and handsome and looking like me with a bald head. There was no example like that in Boston for me. So for me, that was sort of like, I thought I had to go somewhere else to do it, but you told me I didn't. Even when I didn't believe that. My mentors told me I didn't. And now all I've ever wanted to be is that example for the next generation that looks like me, to know what success looks like, and that you can do this in a space like this and do it well.
Powerful words, Dr. J. Keith Motley. This is Mike Haney. We're watching 60 Minutes in Black America. We've got Dr. J. Keith Motley, former Chancellor at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and serial educator, talking about handing it back. And Dr. Motley, as we get further into your tenure at the University of Mass, Boston, as a Chancellor, although we know for the UMass system, you did a number of things, but your power of example goes without question. We haven't begun to go through the 5 pages of work that you've done, starting the preparatory school as a founder, and the tremendous work that you've done in education, as you said, at that podium, which at that point was your pulpit that we talked about a bit earlier, wanting to show others that there is an opportunity regardless of where they come from in life, and if they are bald and Black and 6'9". Hey, I want to bring Tony Vandermeer, Dr. Tony Vandermeer, because he earned that PhD, who worked in the University of Massachusetts Boston system, continues to work there, and he also is a senior lecturer of Africana Studies. So I want to bring Dr. Vandermeer, who also attended Northeastern University, because there's a tremendous circle out here, man, of phenomena.
Well, Tony and I have been on the roof of the African American Institute a few times, and we've been in that Cabral Center a few times, and he knows My first act when I came to University of Massachusetts, Boston, was letting folks know to leave him alone, because that's been my brother since we were teenagers.
Wow.
And we were in this struggle at Northeastern, and in this struggle, all of our adult lives. So it's good to see you, man. I'm glad to see you.
I had to bring him in, Keith, because as I talked about you as a mentor on one side, the athletic, academic, even though Dr. Vandermeer, and as you said that you still call some of your mentors, Doctor or Mister, I feel compelled with you two as well. Even though when I met you both, I was 18, you guys were 20. The power of example, of watching, and every time I think about righting wrong and getting out there, being too tired, leading a protest, and many times I do it with this. This has become a powerful protest tool I have found over the course of decades. I think about Dr. Vandermeer. Every time I think about the appropriate right way to do things, I think about you both. But Tony, thank you so much for being here tonight. And I want to get a sense from you, Dr. Vandermeer, of the relationship with you and Dr. Motley, because we're going to let him take a sip of water, Gatorade, whatever, for a minute, and we're going to talk about him. We're going to talk about him to his face, to what it is that working with him, for him, knowing him before he was an adult old enough to drink.
He's going to keep it PG.
Give us a sense of Give us a sense of Dr. Motley, Dr. Vandermeer.
Well, first of all, Mike, thanks for having me on, and I'm really happy to be on with Keith. He's definitely a very important person in all our lives. And we go, as the song says, we go a long way back.
Long way back.
And we lived in the same dorm together. He played basketball, I played football, right? And right. We spent our days, at the African American Institute, learning to be young men, learning about ourselves, about our community, about this nation, about the world, and so forth. And in fact, I was on the committee, that brought Keith to UMass when he was the vice chancellor for student affairs, right? And Keith, is, as a chancellor, he was the chancellor extraordinary. I mean, to be truthful with you, I wish he was there now, right? In fact, I'm hoping that one day they knock on his door and say they want him to be president of the entire system, right? Because his is the kind of leadership that we need. Keith has a type of relational practice that's so important, particularly not only as a chancellor, but as a person, academic, as a person, period. You asked about this question of, chancellor. The chancellor is definitely, the buck stops there, but he's also the kind of smile and wave guy, and it's like you would see Keith in the hallways, in the cafeteria. He'd stop and talk to you and chat. I mean, this is something has been missing before, missing now, but we love Keith. And we appreciate. I mean, he served as a model for many of us. He's reached places that we haven't seen. We're seeing Black chancellors now and Black presidents now, but he came at a time that was very, very important for us to see. And someone who grew up with him, we're proud of him. To see the things that he's accomplished, and we stand strong with him.
Well, there's no doubt we're proud of you both, Tony, because you were on this show last year. And, we've grown substantially since that time, educating us on what you were doing. In addition, we were talking about Kwanzaa at that period as well, but proud of you both. Matter of fact, I think you may have welcomed him as chancellor to the University of Massachusetts, Boston, because you have been there for a while, correct?
Correct. I've been there for around 28 years.
Yeah. And so, as I was researching.
Can I say something? I know you got.
No, man, you can't say anything. I'm just. Hey, Dr. Motley, this is your show, man. You can say whenever, and whatever you want, sir.
So let me tell you how IS is. So I'm very comfortable at Northeastern, but I knew that if I did not leave Northeastern, I would not achieve my goal as becoming college president, because at that time I was moving towards vice president, and someone told me I was going to be the greatest vice president in the history of Northeastern.
Wow.
For me, that was the first time I ever heard someone set a ceiling for me. When I met, through Tony and them, Dr. Joanne Gora, who was the chancellor at the time, she flies to Denver to see me because she couldn't recruit me away from Northeastern, okay? And she tells me, as soon as I talk to her for an hour, she says, you know you can be chancellor, right? And I told her that I had to talk to Tony, who was on the committee, and I had to talk to Charlie Titus. And if they told me it was worth my coming over to the University of Massachusetts, and I had to talk to Stephanie Janey, because at the time, she was the person who they should have put into that vice chancellor's position they were recruiting me for. And I talked to Stephanie, and she told me that they weren't going to do that, and it was okay for me to come. And once she gave me permission, the rest was history, okay? And then I determined through Tony and those folk that it was time to come. But they were very influential in my coming. In fact, I snuck on campus, and that's kind of hard when you're tall, and I had on a sweatsuit or something trying to fit in, and everybody busted me because I didn't realize how many people from Northeastern worked at UMass. And they were wondering what I was doing there. And then they said, oh, you coming for that job.
Wow.
And I forgot, it was the first time I realized I was at a public university.
Coming for that job.
Nobody knows your business at Northeastern. Everybody knows your business at UMass Boston because it's the only public space and everything is open. Your life is an open book.
Wow. Well, you know, I want to talk with Tony for a second, and you as well, Dr. Motley or Dr. Vandermeer, for a second, because, you know, as much as you influenced that university over the course of the 10 years you were chancellor, the end wasn't written the way that maybe you wanted it to end, in terms of you resigned, you know, with
I didn't resign. See, that's the challenge. No one knows the end but me, because I didn't talk about the end on purpose, because the end is in the work. Every day Tony walks on that campus, he sees the products of the work that we put together. Everything but from the academic infrastructure to the physical infrastructure that keeps on coming every day. I did groundbreakings without having permission to do groundbreakings. So I understood that I had to fall on my sword as leader for an institution that I love. But in turn, I'm a tenured faculty member. Most college presidents aren't. And I'm in the College of Business. So it wasn't like I stepped down from chancellor. I didn't step down from educating. Chancellor is a title. I walk around the campus, and those who see me treat me as like I was treated when I was chancellor. Nothing has changed for me, okay? And the reason I stayed there at the university was to send that message.
So you're saying that the influence that you have in the position that you're in is the position is irrelevant to the influence that you have as a presence there. Is that what you're conveying?
Well,
and that's the whole idea.
Let me add this to the mix. You know, the question is that, you know, Keith has left a legacy. Dr. Motley have left a legacy. And the question, you know, becomes, you know, it's ever present. But when you have a change or you have a shift, people start to do what they want to do, but still your legacy is still present, right? And this is very, very, very important at this moment, because what the university is now and what it could be, right, has been based on work that Dr. Motley has done but they can't do it the way he did it because he's the only one that could do it like that, right? Because that is his personality, that's his character, that is his life experience that he brings on the table that others cannot bring to the table, in terms of what is needed, particularly in a county university. Listen, when Dr. Motley talked about Greg Ricks and Ramona Edelin, these are key people who were in our lives, who shaped how we thought in the way that we did actions and how we stood in the values that we should have. That was priceless, right? And so for us to be there, because you're still dealing with structural racism, and they're still dealing with us in ways that they can't deal with us. But we, sometimes we have to back up, let them fall on their face, and come back on the scene and says, we was trying to tell you that.
So Michael and Dr. Vandermeer, can y'all keep a secret?
Yeah, I can.
Can y'all keep a secret? Can Black America keep a secret? Okay, Tony, the residence halls at the university, you like those? They're beautiful, huh?
Absolutely.
They're going to be named for my wife and I.
Uh-oh.
Do they name something for your wife and for you if there was some issue? But not only did I want them naming it for me, they are naming it for my wife. You understand how powerful that is?
Yep.
Tony knows what I was taught about that. That it's, you don't see buildings named, they name them for the dude. They don't name it for the dude and his wife. My thing was, you named it for my wife. And her name might be first. Angela and Keith Motley residence halls. And we did things like, it's supposed to be one building. Tony knows I built 3 and put a thing that connects all of them and called it one. So all of that's going to be named for the Motleys. So my great grandchildren will walk on a campus where not only do I have academic chairs and buildings and other things named, we have a legacy.
So Dr. Motley, were you building equality when you build out infrastructure? Because you mentioned in one comment I heard that UMass Boston was built on a refuse. Does that mean like a
wasteland on a trash site?
Yeah, a trash, a dump.
In the Pioneer Institute, I saw
to emerge from a dump to what you ultimately made that infrastructure is profound, right? And you did that for the equality of a majority minority institution.
I didn't want our students or my man. Well, the first building we built was one for faculty members. Okay. The second one it's still called the academic building, just classrooms. So they could teach in great spaces. They were teaching in kindergarten looking rooms. Okay. And the other thing about that was when I wanted an institution that when you came there, it felt like the university that everybody else seen. But I wanted also the notion of communiversity, that anybody could come into our campus because once you came out there, you were welcomed onto that space. And so that was the whole notion, and that's all driven by the things that we learned as young people. Those folk weren't perfect. In fact, we debated with most of them more than we let them love us up.
Wow.
But at the end of the day.
But this is important because when you look at the UMass campus in Boston and the kind of work and innovation that Dr. Motley brought there, that UMass is part of a 5-college system, 5-university system. This is why we need the kind of leadership much broadly that also sees the importance and the centrality of the communities, right?
Right.
You see? And so it's important to recognize the work and the legacy because they don't necessarily see us. Du Bois talked about in 1903, the problem of the 20th century, the 19th century is the problem of the color line, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're still dealing with the color line here. And that when you see the work of Dr. Motley that he's done, he said, well, what's happening, right? So we have to be able to, and him and others who've been through similar situations have to be elevated even more so that we could bring the type of justice that's needed, not only in our city, our nation, but throughout the world. It's very important because he's a model of that and he's demonstrated that, and even from the examples that he's setting today. So we have to continue that process.
So finally, I know this is your show, Mike, but the last comment, okay? So I saw you had the Pioneer Institute down the bottom, okay? The Pioneer Institute decided to do 700-hour forensic accounting study. They're the most conservative place in Massachusetts. Now, their intention wasn't to help me. Their intention was to add fuel to the fire, probably. Mm-hmm. But because I know the guy that's running it, I knew his intention was, because I talked with him when he said he was going to do it. I said, okay, here's the deal. If you find something wrong, then hang me on the wall. But if you don't find anything wrong, then write a report that says that. And that's the report that they had to write.
And that's exactly why we have that report up there.
Because when you're dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars, you know what 30 million, even if it was $30 million, you know what that is? That's a $5 tip. Particularly when you have $100 million put away. Do you think I'm not brilliant enough to know if you're built on a dump and you're building things, you're going to run into problems? So we put $100 million away to deal with that issue. So that's why your man is still standing. Okay? All right. The real question becomes, how do you get the same footing for University of Massachusetts, Boston, as you get for all the other campuses?
Precisely.
How do you get that dollar to spread in the same way? Norfolk State University used to get a quarter on the dollar that everybody else got in Virginia. Well, in Massachusetts, when they split up a dollar, I think UMass Boston gets 17 cents. So, are you kidding me? And the rest you got to raise. Mm-hmm. So that's why I became a prolific fundraiser.
Well, there's no doubt, and that's the reason why we have it up there and studied that the Pioneer Institute, we understood who they were because, like I said, we studied you intensely and everything around it that they said.
And they're good people. They're good people, but they're very conservative.
They weren't trying to.
They love me, and I love them. But when they first started, their intent wasn't to come help this guy out of this situation. Okay?
Absolutely. Well, listen, we're going to transition a bit away from there as we, and Dr. Vandermeer, please, you're welcome to stay. We got other people that are coming on to talk about and talk with Keith and Dr. Vandermeer. All of them as well, because we're just one big family tonight.
One big happy family then,
Just one big happy family. So I want to bring in someone that I know is very close to you. And Vince, where's Vince Anderson?
Wow, that's my boy grown.
Before Vince says a word, play that third clip, that last clip. Play the last clip of Keith Motley at the Afro-American Institute. Play that clip. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Dr. J. Keith Motley, former Chancellor of the University of Massachusetts, Boston, but a proud alumni of Northeastern University. Now, some of you know me as your classmate. Some of you know me as the person that recruited you to come to Northeastern as a student or as an athlete. Some of you know me as Dean Motley. And some of you know me as that person who just loved the African American Institute, now known as the John D. O'Brien African American Institute.
An important institute for us all. Vince Anderson, welcome. Vince is out there in California, and I know it's sunny. And let's give an update of that Pittsburgh game. It's Pittsburgh 23, Cincinnati 27 for you Pittsburgh folks. And I'm not making a dig. I just want to make sure that you guys have an understanding of what the score is. But Vince, welcome, man. Thank
But
you
you know, the
so
only
much.
team that matters is beating Baltimore.
What's
Hey,
up,
because
man?
of
What's
you,
up?
Dr. Motley, it's okay. If they beat Baltimore as a result, because of what you say, I'm okay with it because I love you, man.
I love you. What's up, Vince?
Don't believe that.
What's up,
Don't
brother?
believe that. Vince,
What's
how
up?
you
It's good
doing?
to see you, man. This is a wonderful surprise seeing both these brothers.
Vince,
Bless.
you went to Northeastern, and Keith, you're from Pittsburgh as well, right?
Well,
Yes. Yes.
What does that relationship mean and look like with you and Keith, and how far does it go back? And I may have them mute his mic so that we can really get a grasp of what, because you know Keith, right? You know Keith.
I'm gonna do boops and beeps and beeps.
Oh my God. Okay, so it's funny because I obviously had to give this, some thought before I came on, and I met Keith 52 years ago, and I actually met his brother John first. Growing up in Pittsburgh, guys hang out, right? And John was a prolific guitar player and singer, and him and a friend of mine, Edwin Swift and Brady Williams, had a little trio, and that's how I first met the Motleys. I met Keith at Valley View Presbyterian Church, and we were in a Bible study class together, and we were in a choir together, and our parents knew each other and always said, hey, you guys have a lot in common, you ought to connect. And, things being as they may, you meet people, and immediately he became my brother. And it's interesting because as I mentioned, his brother John, God rest his soul, was a musician, and the thing that struck me about Keith was how dynamic he was. He was playing the violin, he was acting, he was in scholar programs, and oh, by the way, he was an athlete, and these were all things that were near and dear to me, and so we bonded over that, and then of course when we met. And I'll tell this to the day I die, I was taller than him.
You were taller than Keith?
I was taller than him.
Was. I was the point guard on the basketball. No one believes it. That's why I couldn't play with my back to the basket.
I'd have to see that picture. I'd have to see that picture.
I was the point guard on the basketball team.
Yeah,
No
yeah,
doubt.
Vince, you got to share that picture.
You gotta share that picture.
All the guys were tall. I looked up to all of them.
Yeah, no, it was crazy, and this of course was our freshman year in high school, and that summer, he had about a 6 or 7 inch growth spurt, wow. And we came back to school, and it's like, oh we got something now.
Y'all were ready for him, huh?
Oh man, and I mean, and we had Ugod's a talent. I mean, you guys know of John Clark.
Absolutely.
You guys probably, I know Tony might have met our homeboy Mel Bennett. There was another cat, Kevin Walls, and all these guys were like 6'6" or better, and they were all like Keith. Well, Mel was more of a board man, but Kevin was a wing, before there were 6'6" wings, and we just had a ton of talent, and we all lived in the same neighborhood. We all used to ball together in the summertime. So, I mean, that's how it started. But it's again, I could talk forever about how it started.
And you all are still good friends to this day, or great friends, or brothers to this day, essentially, right?
It's been an amazing journey. I left Boston in 1982, and it hurt my heart because it was the first time that Keith and I were not going to be in tapping distance of each other, where I could tap him on his shoulder, or he could tap me on my shoulder. But I honestly believe that our journey together prepared me to go to California and pursue my life, and create my success and my his story. And again, I attribute a lot of it to the foundation and the brotherhood, of our friendship, and of course, we've maintained that, over the years through, obviously through telephone, through, playing golf together, visiting for birthdays, for weddings, you name it. So, but yeah, that's
for Chancellor trips.
That's my brother for life.
Chancellor's trips. Well, I got to tell you, this is enlightening, because you guys were always our elders, right? And I've got some younger generational folks that want to come in and share the impression that they had gotten of Dr. Motley and of Dr. Vandermeer and of you, Vince, that were influenced. And so let's bring in Eugene Marshall. Let's bring in Coach Dave Lato. I don't know if Paul Dooley is there. There's Coach Lato. And Paul Dooley.
You got Paul in there. What's up, man?
Dave here done got great, man. What's up with that?
And Coach, and let's let our viewers understand who Coach Lato is, and if the production team can bring in Athletic Director Marshall and Paul Dooley when they get in, as soon as they come in. But Coach Lato, good to see you. And I know that you and Dr. Motley had a tremendous relationship, but what have you been up to? Tell us what you've done over the course of the past number of years and some of the highlights in your life.
Yeah, well, I'll go brief because this is not about me. This is about Dr. Motley. So, I've been since 1984, I've been involved in the game of basketball from a coaching perspective, and I've run the gamut. I've traveled the world. I've been an assistant coach. I've been a head coach, and right now I'm in Atlanta mentoring some of the world's greatest young athletes trying to pursue their dreams to play professional basketball. And so, first of all, I'm honored to be on with you, Mike, and to see Dr. Motley and Vince and Dr. D. It just warms my heart. But in my brief explanation of a relationship, I say it this way because little did I know as a young guy that I would be a mentor. And in order to be a mentor, you have to be a mentee. And Dr. Motley, or Dean Motley, as I knew him, or Keith, my brother, became my mentor. And the pillars of success, as I describe them, are one, you have to come with and have a very strong family. I started my coaching career at Northeastern in 1984. I met a young woman named Joyce on Huntington Avenue. And if you're 24, 25 in Boston and single, you can kind of, run the streets a little bit. And I remember like it was yesterday, Keith pulling me aside and says, Dave, she's not one to mess with. If you're gonna date her, you better be serious. And 32 years later, we've been married for that long. We have 3 wonderful young men that she's raised mostly, and she's allowed me to follow my dream, which is to coach and coach all over the country and do what I do. And she was not at the time a basketball person, so she just believed in me and believed in my experience. But at that day, when I had to kind of straighten up my back and walk a straight line, it was Dean Motley who created a family atmosphere for me. The second part was professionalism. I was a graduate. We had just finished playing and thought, at the time I was a pretty good player and we had some success. I got humbled. And then Coach Calhoun was looking for a former player to coach. And Keith said to Coach Calhoun at the time, what about Dave? And so Coach called me. And again, 38 years later, here I am mentoring young men for my life's work. So he gave me a family. He gave me a professional life to aspire to be and do. And I think I've been pretty successful at it. Culturally, I come from a place, New Bedford, Massachusetts, which is, a melting pot of Cape Verdean people. And coming to Boston was a big deal. When I started coaching, October 15th was always the date you started practicing. on my second year as a head coach at Northeastern, Dean Motley, myself, and a few others jumped on a bus and went to Washington, D.C. for the Million Man March. Now, little did I know that that was a life-changing experience for me to understand the platform of what culture is about and how I could teach it to those who needed it. And lastly, brotherhood, convincing me to become a member of Iota Phi Theta Fraternity Incorporated and follow in the footsteps of other great men and that look like him and talk like him and walk like him was something that I wanted to do. And so those four pillars, made me and created a man that I think would make a lot of people proud. But it mostly taught me about mentorship. And little did I know that that was going to be my life's work, that I would mentor young men as he mentored me. I think of you remember Hassan Smith, who lives here in Atlanta with me, who was at the Institute as a Saturday afternoon project, and he remembers those days like these yesterday. But Hassan is elevated to he's a senior advisor for John Legend. So there are a number of people that we could talk about, like myself, that have been influenced in such a profound way by Keith and his words, his actions, and the walk that he's walked his whole life. So I'm blessed to be riding the wave and believing in the spirituality that he's given all of us, and owe so much to what I didn't know, to what he fed me every single day, and continues to do so from afar.
Amen. Amen. And Dave, even though it may be about Keith, Keith has influenced us all. And look at us all in this room, in this circle, and know each other. And that, to Keith's point, there are people that look like us. There are Black men that look like us that are doing phenomenal things. And, we're very proud of you, Dave, even though you're younger. We call you our young kid, right? You've done some phenomenal things. ACC Coach of the Year at the University of Virginia. Keith, how proud of you are you of this young man?
Well, first of all, we call him OD, Observant Dave, because Dave understood how to be observant, took it all in. And when I called him, I think he was working in a record shop or something. And I said, listen, brother, I need you to come back because I've told Coach, I don't want to be a coach. The platform isn't big enough for me. I don't have a problem with coaching, but I knew I wanted to be a college president. And Coach was one of the first people who said to me, you can do that, but you need to replace yourself. And I told him the only person that I would endorse was Dave. And Dave came in, and the rest is history. Now, he tried to, when he went to Connecticut, convince me to stay in coaching again. And I said, the only person you should take with you from this crew is Dave. I was in California with Vince when Coach called me, telling me they offered him the UConn job. Please come. I said, I told you I don't want to be a coach. I'm going to be a college president. Okay? Because I had met the great Benjamin Mays. And even though Tony knows we used to sit up there protesting those presidents at Northeastern, I thought they were trying to flip me when they all told me I could be a college president one day. All right? But then they introduced me to Dr. Mays, and my life changed. And I saw that image of that man, and I said, that's what I want to be. Okay? But Dave Leto could do anything he wants. He could be a coach. He could be an entrepreneur. He could be anything he wanted to be because he understood that through our work doesn't define us as human beings. He learned that you don't fit this. You don't fit yourself into this work. You fit it into your life, and you live your life. That's why Joyce, that's why my beautiful bride, as I told you, that naming of that building for her isn't some vanity thing. It's because she went through more than I went through. Because as he'll tell you, while the losing and the winning is good for us, they're really devastated by stuff that we get over quick. They wonder why we still talk to certain people. Right?
Resilience.
Preach.
Because we've learned as men You know, we used to fight on the court, and we would love everybody off the
Yeah,
court.
absolutely.
Vince would say, "How did you blow this guy in the face?" And he's your best friend now.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So that's how this works. Okay.
Well,
But
Dr.
no, I'm
Motley,
so proud of that brother.
Motley,
I'm so
there's a
proud of
couple,
him. I'm proud of Vince.
and there's two
and
more people.
Gene
There's
Marshall.
two more people that, you know, they're having some technical difficulties. The production team's trying to get him in here. Paul Dooley, who swears by you, particularly when he transitioned from Pittsburgh to Northeastern with the
That's
personal
right.
issues he had. You know, we all recall that time. His roommate, Eugene Marshall, who is currently the athletic director at Hampton University, lived together, and, you know, to the good of you all, Vince, Dr. Motley, Dr. Vandermeer, even though Dave came a year or two later, you know, we all were in that circle of support because that was what was required. And I want to go up to Vince for a minute as they try to get at least a picture of Paul and Eugene in here, even though their sound's not working. And Vince, when you talk about legacy and you talk about what we as a people owe society, is there anything that you think of to what you've learned? And there's Paul Dooley and his grandkids. Let's at least get his image up there. He's
What's
got
up,
3
Ewok Giddy?
grandkids, and hopefully we can get him in here. And then we got Eugene Marshall. Where's Eugene? There's Eugene running Hampton
He's
University.
so big time he can't get on the screen.
But to the question, Vince, is what do you feel we as Black men owe, if we owe anything at all, towards and turning back and handing back men that look like us or young boys that look like us, to what Dr. Motley said earlier about mentoring?
Well, okay, so I'll preface this by saying I think mentorship is really the foundation of, you know, us, you know, leaving the shackles of how we see ourselves or how we've been seen by others. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the importance of women in our lives. Because as I talked about Keith, you know, the thing that struck me when I met him was his mother and his 3 sisters. And, you know, the love, the support, the nurturing, the at every events, and then their own, you know, individual growths and journeys, and yet, you know, their continued, you know, love and support, you know, for him, you know, for me, you know, for friends in, you know, in our neighborhood, you know, the care, the attention, you know, that part of it is just so tremendous, because, you know, so many people talk about, you know, what we're not as a people in terms of, you know, emotions and love and support. And I'm like, you guys didn't grow up the way I grew up. You guys did not have, you know, the influences, you know, that I had, or the influence that I've been around. And so while mentoring of brothers is important, you can't overlook it. You can't, you know, underscore it in a way that, you know, that diminishes it in any way. But let's not forget, you know, the importance of women, you know, our sisters, our aunts, you know, our mothers, you know, our aunties, you know, our extended family of women who
Amen.
love, support, value, and lift us up, you know, every single day. And that part of it, Mike, is, you know, that's the part when I think about Keith, I can't help but think about his mom and his sisters too. And it does my heart grows every time I have a chance to interact with them. And Keith's sister Lisa called me last week. I hadn't spoke to Lisa in ages, but the love and the care and the attention that I got from her in that, you know, 15-minute conversation reminded me this, you know, of the litany of conversations that we've had over the years, and the love and support that I've always gotten, not only from, you know, from Lisa, but, you know, from the entire Motley family. So mentoring is I again, it's the foundation of us building and promoting, our Black men and enabling them, to be able to function effectively in a world that might not be, always, tilted in their favor. But we couldn't do that, without the foundation and the love and support that we have from our women.
Amen, man. I absolutely agree with you. And Dr. Vandermeer, how about you, man? I know that you continue to push the needle and keep injustice in the face of the world, essentially. I know you've gone to Cuba a number of times. I know you've sponsored trips to Selma. What about you, man? What is today and tomorrow look like as you continue to show as a power of example what work we have to do in this world?
Well, it's hopeful, and I agree with Vince, because when you look at the type of struggles the women in our lives, our mothers, our grandmothers, our aunties, Robin Kelly is doing a section of a new book coming out on my family, and he was able to go way back to my great grandmother Binky Gardner, who was born between 1820 and 1830 in South Carolina, when we were enslaved people. And I always think about what she had to go through for me to be where I'm at. And so, when Vince talked about the women in our lives and the importance of that, particularly in Keith's life, and seeing Keith and look at how he's dealt with the relationship in his life, this is important. So it's about balance, right? It's about balance in terms of not only the mentors, but the women that are in our family, and how we have to honor them and respect them for the resiliency in dealing with the kind of oppression that we have dealt with and are dealing with, So, but, I think that it's hopeful for us, that I just heard you saying that the things that we go through and still continue to move, that people can't handle that, right? It's not that we should handle it, is that we have no choice but to handle it and to be in the positions that we are, in terms of, what Keith have done, with Vince have done, what Dave have done. This is very important, but also to be humble and to continue to maintain our humanity, because that's what we want others to see, to carry on this tradition and carry on this legacy. And so I'm very appreciative to be on this program with all of these esteemed great forces this year, and who've made an important contribution to our community and to the society at large.
And he's humble, Mike, he's humble because this week he was chosen as the Chancellor's faculty member that they honored at commencement. And he has a lecture that he's doing this week because of him being chosen by the university as one of 4 faculty members that were honored at commencement. Okay. And so that's Tony Vandermeer. That's Dr. Tony Vandermeer. I think it's the 22nd.
Yes.
That they are doing it.
Yes.
Wow. That's powerful, Tony. Congratulations, Dr. Vandermeer. And Dr. Motley, we're going to let you wrap things up. I just want to get a sense from Dave later before we let your guest go, Dr. Motley. Dave, you've spent decades, man. When you look back on, I remember when you came to Northeastern, man, tall, lanky, young, and here you are, graceful, mature, leading lives and directing lives. What is your thought about mentoring, and how do you feel, direction we need to go and to continue to direct our young men and women in the right direction? How do you do that?
Well, mentorship is such a powerful force, because for our young Black brothers and sisters, we don't have as many of them. This is a very, very critical time in everybody's lives. And so I use basketball, try to always, but particularly right now, use basketball as an opportunity to teach life lessons. That's because that was taught to me that way. So I just had a 90-minute meeting this morning with my 11 in my small group, and we talked about things that basketball brings us together for, but life will make them successful for. And so a young man today, because that's why I deal with more men than women, has a much better chance of failing than succeeding. So they need to look up to somebody, whether they understand it or not, and figure out their place in this world so that they can beat the odds. You know, basketball is the ultimate drug that can lure us to a place of success. But most likely it can get them to a place of failure without even knowing it, because it uses us. And so that's my job. It's particularly my job here because as an elder statesman, I get to be the philosopher in the group. So hopefully, as I say to them, if you learn anything from me as a mentor, it's going to be time, responsibility, communication skills. It's going to be controlling of emotions, all put together in discipline. And so those are things that were taught to me. I try to teach them to them in a society, as I mentioned, that they're making an assumption that we don't have common sense. And by virtue of that, they can pull the wool over our eyes. That's what's going on in this world today. And so having a conscience, a spiritual conscience, a social conscience, and a self-pride in that conscience is critical to their foundation as young people. And I take that very seriously because that's how I made it, is that I was, if nothing else, I was a good listener. And I had people like Keith in my life that I could listen to. And ultimately now, it's just paying forward. That's all I need to do is continue to pay that forward as a mentor.
Very, very well said. And I appreciate you, man, for what you have done. And it truly takes a village. And we're going to give Dr. Motley, and I almost said Reverend Motley. Reverend Dr. Motley. So that's your new title, Reverend Dr. Motley, right? We're going to give you your 3-minute pulpit, man, and tell us, man, what it is. What's your message today for us, man? What's your message for the world?
Well, the first thing I want to say is thank you to my brothers, all of you. You all, I've learned so much, and each of you have a different piece of my heart. I love you all in your special way. And what I want to say to this audience is that what centers all of us is knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. And someone talked about this notion of chancellor earlier. It doesn't matter what they call you. Who am I? What am I? I'm not an angry, self-destructive black man. No, my title is not, I don't live this life of trying to be anything but God's child. I see myself through the lens of high achieving, excellence embodied, healthy, strong, creative, innovative, worth seeing and hearing when I come, connected to my creator unconditionally, honor to my parents, period, supportive of my spouse, supportive of my spouse, supportive of my spouse, lover of my children, carer for my community, hard worker, persistent in my purpose, enduring in my goals, builder, protector, educator, visionary, planner, implementer, physically fit now that I'm not chancellor because I have time to work out. I want to always be kind and considerate, thoughtful and fair, just and wise. And if I can do that with all the gifts that God has given me, and if we always remember to bring that constellation of skills forward, then when I close my eyes, then the notion of well done is well done. And so I keep striving every day, as I mentioned, to learn, to get better, and to keep that integrity around the issues that matter to me. And that is my family, my people, my community, and all of you. And so I'm so grateful, Mike, that you allowed me to come and share, that you surprised me with these brothers, that we don't have an opportunity sometime to do this on screen together. This is something now we have on tape that we can look at in those moments when we need to be reflective. And so thank you for facilitating that. I'm so sad that Doo-Wop couldn't get in. Dooley, that's my homeboy. And then my main man, Eugene Marshall, who we go through thick and thin. He was one of my youngsters who has been with me, like Dave and like Vince and like Tony and like you, all these years. We ran marathons together, okay? Believe it or not. The Boston Marathon. and our mentor, Dr. Arthur Davis Jr. My wife, Angie, and I were just talking about Gene yesterday because we rode through Newton past Doc's house, Gene, and just brought your name up. So not knowing that I was going to see all of you all tonight. So Michael, thank you for doing that, man. You're a great man, and I'm so proud of you, and I'm so grateful to see how 60 Minutes in Black America has evolved. Thanks
Hey,
so
well,
much.
I appreciate you so much. I love you,
Love
Dr.
you too,
Motley.
brother.
Always have, man. And, you know, you have always served as a role model and power of example. And I would have want nothing less than to let, because this was your show, this was our show, and Dave Lato and Vince Anderson, Paul Dooley, Eugene Marshall, who else do we have?
Dr.
Dr.
Tony
Vandermeer,
Vandermeer.
Dr. Vandermeer. And, you know, as Vince said, you know, where would we be? Because my mother took me to Boston without the women in our lives. But we know the persecution that we as Black men go through. And it is a power of example to see 8 on the screen and then the ones behind the scenes that are working as power of examples, man. So I appreciate you. And we will have you back in the future.
Thank you.
This has been an
Give the
awesome
team
show.
my love, man. Give the team my love.
I absolutely will, man. And this has been a wonderful edition of 60 Minutes in Black America. My name is Mike Haney. Black America, the Black USA News Network televises 7 days a week. And immediately following this show of 60 Minutes Black and Black America, Date 'em All Sis with the incomparable host, Erica Alston Buck. Tonight they're focusing on when not to date and focus on yourself. Monday through Friday, the Donnie Glover Show, morning show at 9 a.m. Shared spaces with Lakita and Chap, Mondays at 7. The Troy Rawlings Show from Los Angeles. Each day at noon, Political Cipher with Quandra Gaines on Wednesday at 7. Black Business Roundtable from Oakland, California with Art and Dr. Ashley on Thursdays at 6. Go on the blackusa.newsnet website to see a listing of all our shows. Sundays at 9 a.m. with the Honorable Martin Mitchell, People Over Politics. Next Sunday on 60 Minutes in Black America, we will have Dr. Will Moreland from Phoenix, Arizona, talking about the genius in you, maximizing your potential, being able to write your book, to get your story out of your head into paper, so as he said, you can make some money. We also would like to give an update to a powerful story we did 3-4 weeks ago with Trey Jones, who was exonerated, freed from prison after 37 years in July, attended, thanks to the viewers and donating tickets, his first game today at Baltimore Raven Stadium. And he wants to thank everyone for their support and their communications. Trey, good to see you, and I'm glad you had a wonderful time. Again, 60 Minutes in Black America. We'll see you next Sunday at 6 p.m.